A widowed millionaire decides to live a day as a beggar to teach his son the true value of kindness. Amid cold streets and indifferent stares, they find only silence, until a humble cleaning lady appears with a heart-wrenching gesture. She gives everything she has, unaware that she will change father and son's fate forever. What starts as a lesson in compassion turns into an unexpected search for the perfect new mother. Chapter 1. The Lesson. Ethan Carter stood at the window of his penthouse office, overlooking the Boston skyline with its blend of historic architecture and modern skyscrapers. At 42, he was the picture of success, CEO of Carter Development, one of the most prestigious real estate companies in Massachusetts. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he had helped shape through numerous commercial and residential projects. Yet as he gazed at the bustling streets below, a familiar emptiness gnawed at him. "Daddy, look what I got!" 8-year-old Tyler burst into the office holding a brand new tablet. The boy's excitement filled the room, temporarily pushing away Ethan's melancholy. "That's great, buddy," Ethan said, turning to face his son. "Did Mrs. Davis buy that for you?" "No, I ordered it myself using your Amazon account," Tyler replied proudly. "It was super easy. I just clicked buy now and put in your password. It came this morning." Ethan sighed. 3 years had passed since his wife Sarah's unexpected passing, leaving him to raise their son alone. Despite his best efforts, he worried that Tyler was becoming too accustomed to getting whatever he wanted, without understanding its value. The household staff, especially Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper who had been with them since Tyler was born, tended to indulge the boy's every whim in an attempt to compensate for his loss. "Tyler, we need to talk about asking permission before buying things," Ethan began, but stopped when he noticed his son was already absorbed in his new gadget, barely listening. That evening, as they sat at their expansive dining table, Tyler barely touched his dinner, complaining that the chef had prepared salmon again when he'd wanted steak. "But you loved salmon last week," Ethan reminded him. "That was last week," Tyler retorted, pushing his plate away. "Can I be excused? I want to finish setting up my tablet." As Ethan watched his son leave the table, an uncomfortable realization settled in his chest. Was he raising a child who valued things over people, who expected the world to cater to his desires without a second thought for others? Sarah would have known how to handle this. She had always been the compassionate one, volunteering at shelters and donating generously to various causes. She believed in raising their son to be kind and empathetic. That night, after putting Tyler to bed, Ethan found himself looking through old photo albums. Sarah's warm smile beamed from every picture, especially those taken at the community center where she volunteered. In one photo, she stood with a group of children from underprivileged backgrounds, her arm around a young girl who clutched a book Sarah had given her. "I'm failing her, Sarah," Ethan whispered to the photograph. "I don't know how to teach him what really matters." The idea came to him at 3 in the morning, jarring him from a restless sleep. It was unconventional, perhaps even crazy, but it might be the only way to show Tyler a reality beyond his privileged bubble. The next morning, Ethan called his executive assistant to clear his schedule for the following day. "Personal day," he explained, brushing aside her surprised questions. Then he called Tyler's school, informing them that his son would be absent, due to a family educational opportunity. That evening, he sat Tyler down in the living room. "Tomorrow you and I are going on an adventure," Ethan announced, trying to sound enthusiastic despite his nervousness about what he was planning. "Like Disney World?" Tyler's eyes lit up. "No, not Disney World. Something more important. We're going to learn about real life, about people who don't have all the things we have." Tyler's excitement visibly deflated. "Like a museum or something boring?" "Not exactly." Ethan took a deep breath. "We're going to spend the day experiencing what it's like to have nothing." The next morning, before dawn, Ethan led a confused and slightly grumpy Tyler to the guest bathroom. On the counter lay a set of tattered clothes he had purchased from a thrift store the previous day. "Put these on," he instructed, changing into his own worn-out attire, faded jeans with holes at the knees, a threadbare flannel shirt and scuffed boots. "They smell weird," Tyler complained, reluctantly slipping on the oversized t-shirt and ripped jeans. "That's part of the experience," Ethan replied, applying a mixture of coffee grounds and dirt to his face and hands. He did the same to Tyler, who squirmed but allowed it after Ethan explained it was like Halloween makeup. "Are we playing a game?" Tyler asked, looking at his dirty reflection with a mix of confusion and intrigue. "In a way," Ethan replied. "We're going to pretend we're homeless for a day. No money, no phones, no home to go back to. Just us on the streets asking for help." "But why would we do that?" Tyler's brow furrowed. Ethan knelt to his son's level. "Because I want you to understand something important. Something your mom always tried to teach us, that the true measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they're willing to give when they don't have much." They slipped out of the building through the service entrance, avoiding the doorman who would have certainly raised questions. Ethan had mapped out their destination, Downtown Crossing, a busy shopping area where people from all walks of life converged. By mid-morning, they were sitting on a piece of cardboard near a busy pedestrian area. Ethan had fashioned a sign that read, "Please help, hungry." Tyler, initially treating it like a game, quickly grew uncomfortable as people walked, past most avoiding eye contact. Some muttered about getting a job just loud enough to be heard. A few tossed coins without stopping. "Daddy, that lady just looked at us like we're garbage," Tyler whispered, shrinking against his father's side after a well-dressed woman had given them a disgusted glance and crossed to the other side of the street. "Some people are afraid of what they don't understand," Ethan explained gently. "Or maybe they've forgotten that we're all just people." By noon, they had collected exactly $3.47 in change. Tyler's initial enthusiasm had completely evaporated, replaced by hunger and a growing sense of invisibility. They used their meager earnings to buy a single hot dog from a street vendor, which they shared. "I want to go home," Tyler said after they finished eating, his voice small and tired. "I don't like this anymore." "Just a little longer," Ethan urged, feeling a pang of guilt at his son's distress, but convinced the lesson was too important to cut short. This is how some people live every day, not just for a few hours. As the afternoon wore on, the initial novelty of their adventure had completely worn off. Tyler sat huddled against his father, his small face solemn as he watched the indifferent crowd stream past. Ethan began to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake. Was this too harsh a lesson for an 8-year-old? "Look at them," an older businessman remarked loudly to his companion as they passed, "using a kid to get more handouts. Disgusting." Tyler's eyes welled with tears, and Ethan felt a surge of protective anger. Before he could respond, a soft voice spoke from beside them. "Don't mind them. Some people speak without thinking." Ethan looked up to see a young woman in a cleaner's uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face tired but her eyes kind. She knelt down to their level, reaching into her pocket. "I'm not carrying much today," she said, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills and change. "But please take this. There's a diner around the corner that has decent soup." She placed $14.25 into Tyler's small hand, closing his fingers around it with a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," Ethan managed, genuinely moved by the unexpected kindness. "I get off at 6, she continued. "If you're still around, I'll bring back something more substantial." She glanced at Tyler with concern. "A kid shouldn't be out in this cold." As she walked away, Tyler looked down at the money in his hand, then up at his father with wide eyes. "Daddy, she gave us all her money," he whispered, awestruck. "But she's not rich, her shoes had holes." Ethan nodded, something tightening in his chest as he watched the young woman disappear into the crowd. In that simple act of generosity, she had demonstrated exactly what he had been trying to teach his son. "What's her name?" Tyler asked. "I don't know," Ethan replied, "but I think we should find out." Chapter 2. The Golden Heart. "Let's follow her," Ethan said impulsively, gathering their few belongings. Tyler looked confused but nodded, his curiosity piqued by the woman who had shown them kindness when no one else would. They maintained a discreet distance as they followed her through the crowded streets. The woman walked with purpose, her shoulders slightly hunched from fatigue but her steps quick and determined. She entered a gleaming office tower, one of the new buildings that Ethan's company had actually financed 2 years earlier. Though, of course, she couldn't know that. Willow Tower, Ethan murmured, recognizing the distinctive glass facade. She must work for the cleaning service they contract. They waited outside, settling on a bench across the street where they could see the entrance. Tyler, despite his earlier complaints, seemed energized by their new mission. "Is she a superhero?" he asked, his imagination clearly at work. "Like Fern Disguise?" Ethan smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Not all heroes wear capes, buddy. Sometimes they wear cleaning uniforms and give away their lunch money." As they waited, Ethan found himself wondering about the woman. What was her story? What made someone with so little give so freely? The few hours they'd spent experiencing rejection and invisibility had been illuminating, but her simple act of kindness had been the most powerful part of the day's lesson. Later, as the evening crowd of office workers streamed out of the building, they spotted her emerging in her street clothes, jeans, a worn parka, and a red scarf wrapped around her neck against the autumn chill. She looked around, scanning the area, and Ethan realized she was looking for them. He felt a twinge of guilt for their deception, but reminded himself of the purpose behind it. They approached her cautiously, and her face lit up with recognition. "You're still here," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I was worried you might have moved on. I brought some sandwiches." She held up a paper bag. "They're from the cafeteria. Nothing fancy, but they're warm." "Thank you," Ethan said, genuinely touched. "I'm Jack, by the way, and this is my son, Max." The aliases came easily, part of the story he'd constructed for their charade. "I'm Lily," she replied with a smile that transformed her tired face. "Lily Morgan." They sat together on the bench as the evening traffic rushed by. Lily unwrapped thick turkey sandwiches and passed them over. Tyler, or Max as he was now playing along, devoured his with the enthusiasm of a truly hungry child. "How long have you been—" Lily hesitated, clearly trying to find a delicate way to phrase her question. "On the streets," Ethan supplied. "Not long. I lost my job in construction after an injury. Couldn't keep up with rent. My wife's been gone 3 years now." The last part, at least, was true, and Ethan was surprised by the emotion that crept into his voice. Tyler looked up at him, momentarily confused by the elaboration of their fictional story, but thankfully remained silent. Lily nodded, compassion in her eyes. "It's tough out there. The system doesn't exactly help people get back on their feet." She took a small bite of her own sandwich. "I know what it's like to struggle, been there myself." "You don't have to help us," Ethan said softly. "We'll be okay." "Maybe," she replied with a shrug, "but I'd never forgive myself if I just walked by, especially with a child involved." She glanced at Tyler with a gentle smile. "How old are you, Max?" "8, Tyler answered, remembering to use his alias. "But I'll be 9 in December." "That's a great age," Lily said warmly. "I work with kids your age sometimes at the community center on weekends." As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, Lily looked increasingly concerned. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? The shelters fill up fast, and some don't take families." Ethan hesitated. The original plan had been to continue their charade for just the day, then return home. But something about Lily's genuine concern made him reluctant to end their encounter. "We'll find somewhere," he said vaguely. Lily bit her lip, clearly wrestling with a decision. "Look, I know this is unusual, but I have a fold-out couch. It's not much, but it's warm and there's hot water for a shower." She looked at Tyler, whose eyelids were growing heavy. "You both look like you could use a good night's rest." Ethan was stunned by the offer. This woman, who likely lived paycheck to paycheck, was willing to open her home to complete strangers. "We couldn't impose," he started, but Lily cut him off. "It's just for tonight," she insisted. "And honestly, it would make me feel better. Knowing you're not out in this cold." Tyler tugged at his father's sleeve. "Please, Dad, I'm really tired." The plaintive note in his son's voice settled it. "Thank you, Lily. That's incredibly generous." They followed her to a bus stop, and 20 minutes later were in a modest neighborhood of small apartment buildings and corner stores. Lily's apartment was on the third floor of an older building with no elevator. The hallways were clean, but worn with faded carpet and flickering fluorescent lights. "Home sweet home," she said with a slightly self-conscious smile as she unlocked her door. "It's nothing fancy." The apartment was small, a combined living room and kitchenette, a tiny bathroom visible through an open door, and what appeared to be a single bedroom. But it was immaculately clean and arranged with obvious care. Plants lined the windowsill, their green leaves adding life to the space. Bookshelves made of cinder blocks and boards held an impressive collection of well-worn paperbacks. A patchwork quilt draped over the small sofa added a splash of color. "Did you make that?" Ethan asked, pointing to the quilt. Lily nodded, setting her keys in a small dish by the door. "My grandmother taught me. It's a good skill to have, makes old things new again." As promised, she unfolded the sofa into a bed and produced clean sheets and blankets from a trunk that doubled as a coffee table. "The bathroom's all yours. There should be clean towels on the rack." Tyler wasted no time claiming the first shower, leaving Ethan alone with Lily in the kitchenette. "Coffee?" she offered, filling a kettle. "It's instant, I'm afraid." "That would be great, thank you." Ethan watched as she moved efficiently in the small space, the question that had been nagging at him finally spilling out. "Why are you doing this, Lily?" "Taking in strangers, it's risky." She paused, considering her answer. "I believe we're all just one bad break away from needing help. When I was 19, my mom got sick. Cancer. We lost everything paying for treatments that didn't even work." Pain flickered across her face at the memory. "A teacher from my high school let us stay in her guest room for 3 months. Without her, we'd have been on the streets." She poured hot water into mugs, stirring the instant coffee. "I promised myself I'd pay it forward when I could." "Even when you don't have much yourself?" Ethan asked softly. "Especially then," she replied, meeting his eyes. "That's when it matters most, don't you think?" The depth of her compassion left Ethan speechless. Here was someone who understood the value of generosity in a way that many of his wealthy associates never would. Tyler emerged from the bathroom in his same clothes, but with a clean face and damp hair. "The hot water feels amazing," he announced. His spirits clearly lifted. Lily laughed. "Your turn," she told Ethan, handing him a mug. "Drink this first. You look like you need it." Later, after they had both showered and Lily had insisted on washing their clothes, they'll be dry by morning, they sat around her small table eating bowls of canned soup that she'd heated up. "So what's your plan?" Lily asked gently. "For tomorrow, I mean." Ethan hadn't thought that far ahead. The charade was meant to last just one day, but he found himself reluctant to end it. There was something about Lily that intrigued him, a strength and warmth that he hadn't encountered in a long time. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Try to find work, I guess." "I might be able to help with that," Lily offered. "The building where I work sometimes needs day laborers for moving furniture or basic maintenance. It's not permanent, but it's something." "You'd do that for us?" Ethan asked, genuinely touched by her continued kindness. "Why not?" she replied with a simple shrug. "Everyone deserves a chance." After dinner, Lily insisted they take the fold-out couch while she would sleep in her room. As she bid them good night, Tyler surprised both adults by giving her a spontaneous hug. "Thank you for being nice to us," he said, his voice muffled, against her middle. Lily's eyes met Ethan's over the boy's head, and the emotion in them stirred something long dormant in his heart. "You're welcome, Max," she said softly, returning the hug. "Get some rest now." Later, as Tyler slept soundly beside him on the pull-out couch, Ethan stared at the ceiling, conflicted about the deception they were maintaining. The lesson he'd intended to teach his son had become complicated by Lily's unexpected entrance into their lives. She was offering them genuine help based on a lie, and that didn't sit right with him. Yet there was something about her, an authenticity he hadn't encountered in his usual social circles of business partners and socialites. In just one day, she had shown his son more about compassion and generosity than he had managed in years. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself in the darkness, listening to the gentle sounds of Lily moving about in her room, preparing for bed. Tomorrow, he would have to make a decision, continue the charade and learn more about this remarkable woman, or end the deception and return to their real lives, forever changed by the experience. Chapter 3. Unexpected Bonds. Morning arrived, with the gentle sounds of Lily moving about the apartment, careful not to wake her guests. Ethan opened his eyes, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, before the events of the previous day came rushing back. Beside him, Tyler slept peacefully, his face relaxed in a way Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. "Sorry," Lily whispered when she noticed Ethan was awake. "I tried to be quiet. I have to leave for work soon." She was already dressed in her cleaner's uniform, her hair pulled back, a travel mug of coffee in her hand. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a warm glow around her. "What time is it?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Just after 5, she replied. "Early shift today. There's cereal in the cabinet, milk in the fridge. Help yourselves." She hesitated, then added, "The spare key is in the drawer by the sink. Lock up if you go out." The trust implicit in that statement wasn't lost on Ethan. "You're giving us your key. You barely know us." Lily smiled, a simple expression that somehow brightened the entire room. "I'm a pretty good judge of character, Jack. You're down on your luck, not dishonest." She grabbed a light jacket from a hook by the door. "I'm off at 3 today. If you're serious about work, meet me at Willow Tower around 3:30. I'll talk to the maintenance supervisor." After she left, Ethan lay back, staring at the ceiling. The charade had already gone further than he'd intended. He had meetings scheduled for tomorrow that couldn't be postponed, responsibilities waiting. Yet the thought of ending this experience, of returning to their normal lives without fully understanding the lesson it offered, felt premature. Tyler stirred beside him. "Is Lily gone?" he asked sleepily. "Yes, she went to work," Ethan replied, sitting up. "How did you sleep?" "Good." Tyler looked around the small apartment with curious eyes. "Her house is tiny, like really tiny." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But it's clean and warm, and she made us feel welcome." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "She's nice, nicer than Mrs. Davis, even though Mrs. Davis has that big room in our house and Lily has to sleep in a closet." Ethan chuckled at his son's characterization of Lily's bedroom, but the observation held truth. Their housekeeper, who lived in the spacious guest suite of their home, often complained about accommodations that were far more luxurious than Lily's entire apartment. They spent the morning exploring Lily's neighborhood, a working-class area, with small businesses, community gardens tucked between buildings, and neighbors who greeted each other by name. Ethan kept their disguise intact, though he allowed them a modest breakfast at a local diner, using some of the emergency cash he'd hidden in his sock. By mid-afternoon, they were waiting outside Willow Tower as promised. Lily emerged from the employee entrance, her face lighting up when she spotted them. "You came," she said, sounding pleased. "Come on, I talked to Mike in maintenance. He might have something for you." Mike turned out to be a burly man with a perpetual scowl who looked Ethan up and down skeptically. "You done construction before?" "Yes," Ethan replied truthfully. His first job after college had been with a construction company, learning the business from the ground up before joining his father's firm. "Fine. We're clearing out the storage rooms on 14, moving furniture, breaking down cubicles. It ain't pretty, but it pays cash under the table. Start tomorrow, 7 sharp. Outside, Lily was waiting anxiously. "Well, I got it," Ethan confirmed, surprised by the genuine sense of accomplishment he felt. "Thanks to you." Her smile was worth the deception, he decided. "Let me take you both to dinner to celebrate," she insisted. "There's a great pizza place around the corner." Over pepperoni pizza, they learned more about Lily. She was 28, had been working as a cleaner for 5 years while taking online classes toward a teaching degree, and volunteered at a community center on weekends, helping kids with reading. "I love books," she explained, her eyes animated as she described the children's reading program she'd helped establish. "They're like little doorways to different worlds. When I was a kid, books were my escape." Tyler, who had been quiet for most of the meal, suddenly spoke up. "My mom used to read to me every night, but she's gone now." The sadness in his voice was real, and Ethan felt a sharp pang of grief. Sarah had indeed read to Tyler every night, a tradition that had fallen away after her passing, despite Ethan's initial attempts to maintain it. Lily's face softened with compassion. "I'm sorry to hear that, Max." She reached across the table, briefly touching Tyler's hand. "What kind of stories did she read to you?" "Adventures," Tyler replied, warming to the subject. "Stories with dragons and knights and magic." "I have some books like that," Lily offered. "Would you like me to read one to you tonight?" Tyler nodded eagerly, and something in Ethan's chest tightened at the sight of his son's enthusiasm. It had been a long time since he'd seen Tyler this engaged, this open to connection. That night, true to her word, Lily sat on the edge of the fold-out couch and read from a worn copy of The Hobbit, her voice bringing the story to life with different accents for each character. Tyler was entranced, his eyes wide as he followed the adventure, occasionally interrupting with questions that Lily answered patiently. Ethan watched from the kitchenette, a strange emotion welling up inside him. There was something so natural, so genuine about the scene before him. It reminded him of Sarah, of the family they had been, of the warmth that had seemed to disappear from their home after her passing. The routine continued for days, stretching into a week. Ethan worked alongside the maintenance crew during the day, discovering muscles he'd forgotten he had, while Tyler spent time with an elderly neighbor who watched children for working parents. In the evenings, they shared meals with Lily, and each night ended with a chapter from The Hobbit. On the fifth night, after Lily had finished reading and Tyler had fallen asleep, she joined Ethan on the small balcony where he sat watching the city lights. "You're good with tools," she remarked, leaning against the railing beside him. "Mike says you're the best worker he's had in months." Ethan smiled, oddly pleased by the compliment. "I've had some experience." "It shows." She was quiet for a moment, then added softly, "Max is starting to come out of his shell. When he first got here, he seemed so guarded." "He's been through a lot," Ethan replied, the truth of that statement hitting him harder than expected. In his effort to provide everything material that Tyler might want, had he neglected the emotional connection his son needed? "You both have," Lily acknowledged. She hesitated, then asked, "What was she like? Your wife?" The question caught him, off guard. "Sarah?" He rarely spoke her name aloud anymore, the pain of loss still sharp after 3 years. "She was incredible, kind, smart, passionate about helping others. She volunteered at a community center, not unlike the one where you work." "She sounds wonderful," Lily said quietly. "She was." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "Tyler, Max, is a lot like her, has her heart." "I can see that," Lily agreed. "He's a special kid." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but something had changed between them. A connection had formed, deeper than Ethan had anticipated when this charade began. Lily was no longer just a subject in his lesson about compassion. She had become someone important to both him and Tyler. The next morning, as Ethan prepared to leave for his maintenance job, Tyler made an announcement that stopped him in his tracks. "Can I stay with Mom today instead of Mrs. Jenkins?" Ethan froze. "Mom?" "Lily," Tyler clarified, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "She said she's off today and could take me to the library." Lily looked as startled as Ethan felt, her cheeks flushing. "I did offer to take him to the library," she confirmed quickly. "But Max, sweetie, I'm not—" "I know you're not my real—" "Mom," Tyler interrupted, his voice matter of fact. "But you read to me and make me feel better when I'm sad, just like she did. So you're kind of like a mom." The simplicity of the child's logic left both adults speechless. Ethan saw the conflict in Lily's eyes, surprised, touched by the sentiment, but aware of boundaries being crossed. "It's okay if you don't want me to call you that," Tyler added, suddenly uncertain in the face of their silence. "It's not that," Lily said gently, kneeling to his level. "I'm very honored. I just don't want to take your real mom's place." "You're not," Tyler assured her. "My real mom is in heaven, but I think she'd like you a lot." Ethan watched the exchange with a tightness in his chest that was both painful and oddly sweet. The charade was becoming dangerously real. Tyler was forming an attachment to Lily that would make the eventual revelation of their true circumstances even more complicated. Yet as the days passed, Ethan found himself equally caught up in the fiction they were living. He looked forward to returning to Lily's apartment each evening, to the simple meals they shared, to the conversations that stretched late into the night after Tyler was asleep. He learned about her dreams of finishing her degree, of opening a children's bookstore with a reading room, where kids from the neighborhood could gather after school. "It's silly," she confessed one night, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "In this economy, independent bookstores barely survive." "It's not silly," Ethan countered. "It's beautiful, and the right business plan could make it work." She laughed softly. "Listen to you, talking like a businessman. What do you know about business plans?" "More than you realize," he thought, but said only, "I read a lot, when I can." 2 weeks into their stay, Ethan realized with a start that he hadn't checked his business email in days. The company he'd spent years building, the deals worth millions, none of it had seemed as urgent as this simpler life he was temporarily inhabiting. As for Tyler, his son was flourishing in ways Ethan hadn't seen since Sarah's passing. He was more considerate, more curious about others, less focused on possessions. But the deception couldn't continue indefinitely. Ethan's executive assistant had been covering for him, handling the most urgent matters, but there were meetings scheduled for next week that required his presence. Reality was calling them back. More troubling was the realization that had been growing within him for days. He was falling in love with Lily, not with the idea of her generosity, not with the lesson she represented, but with her. Her quiet strength, her unwavering optimism despite hardship, her genuine kindness that expected nothing in return. As he lay awake that night, listening to her soft movements in the next room, Ethan made his decision. Tomorrow, he would end the charade. He would tell Lily the truth, face her anger and disappointment, and accept whatever consequences came. It was the only way forward, the only path that offered any hope of turning this deception into something real and lasting. What he didn't anticipate was how deeply the truth would cut, or how high the cost of his lesson would ultimately be. Chapter 4. Truth Revealed. The restaurant Ethan chose for his confession was far from Lily's neighborhood, an upscale establishment in Back Bay where reservations were normally booked weeks in advance. The maitre d' recognized him immediately, of course, despite his now slightly shaggy appearance after 2 weeks away from his regular barber. "Mr. Carter, we haven't seen you in months. Your usual table is available." Ethan winced at the use of his real name but nodded, grateful that Lily was still in the restroom and hadn't heard. He'd told her only that he wanted to take her somewhere special, to thank her for everything she'd done. Tyler was spending the evening with Mrs. Jenkins, the kindly neighbor who had taken a shine to him. When Lily emerged, her eyes widened at the elegance surrounding them. She had dressed in her best, a simple blue dress that Ethan suspected was reserved for special occasions, but it was clear she felt out of place among the crystal and fine china. "Jack," she whispered, as they were led to a secluded corner table. "With a view of the Boston Common, this is too much. We can't afford this." "It's taken care of," he assured her, pulling out her chair. "Please, just enjoy it. There's something important I need to tell you." Her expression shifted from discomfort to concern. "Are you leaving? You've found a better job somewhere else?" "Not exactly." Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of his deception suddenly crushing. "Lily, I haven't been honest with you." Before he could continue, a sommelier approached with a bottle of champagne. "Mr. Carter's preferred vintage," he announced, presenting the label for inspection. Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "Mr. Carter? Please," Ethan told the sommelier, "give us a few minutes." After the man retreated, Lily's eyes locked with Ethan's, wariness replacing the warmth he'd grown accustomed to seeing. "Who's Mr. Carter?" "I am," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Ethan Carter, not Jack, and my son is Tyler, not Max." Lily sat perfectly still, her face a mask of incomprehension. "I don't understand." I'm the CEO of Carter Development. We built Willow Tower where you work. I'm not homeless, Lily. I'm not unemployed. He hesitated, the words sticking in his throat. I'm actually quite wealthy. The color drained from her face. This is a joke, she said flatly, a very cruel joke. It's not a joke, Ethan said quickly, reaching for her hand across the table, but she pulled away. It started as a lesson for Tyler. He was becoming materialistic, taking everything for granted. I wanted to show him what really matters in life. Compassion, generosity, the things that my late wife valued most. A lesson, Lily repeated, her voice hollow. So I was what exactly? A prop in your little social experiment? The poor kind-hearted cleaning lady who takes in the fake homeless people? No, Ethan protested, desperation creeping into his voice. It didn't start that way, but it became something else. Something real. Real? Lily's laugh was brittle, lacking any trace of humor. You lied about everything, your name, your circumstances. You let me worry about you, try to help you find work. You let me share my home with you. Her voice broke slightly. You let your son call me Mom. Die. Pain in her eyes was unbearable. Ethan had prepared himself for anger, indignation, even disgust. But the profound hurt he saw now was worse than any reaction he'd anticipated. I know I've handled this all wrong, he said. But my feelings for you are genuine, Lily. The time we've spent together, the connection we've made, that's real. Is it? She looked around the opulent restaurant, then back at him, her eyes narrowing. How could it be real when I don't even know who you are? The man I thought I was falling for doesn't exist. Her words, both the revelation that she had been developing feelings for him and the assertion that those feelings were based on a fiction, struck Ethan like physical blows. I'm still the same person, he insisted. The circumstances were a lie, but who I am with you, how I feel about you, that's the truest thing in my life right now. Lily shook her head, a tear escaping despite her obvious effort to maintain composure. You had no right to use me like this to let me care about you and your son based on a lie. I never meant to hurt you, Ethan said softly. But you did. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. I need to go. Please, Lily, let me explain. Explain. What? Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby diners. How you thought it would be fun to play poor for a while. How you watched me give you money I could barely spare. How you let me worry about your future. About where you'd live, whether you'd find steady work. Her voice cracked. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Ethan stood as well, desperate to salvage the situation. At least let me drive you home. I'll take the tea, she said firmly, gathering her purse. Don't follow me, Ethan. His real name sounded foreign on her lips, spoken with none of the warmth that had characterized their interactions over the past 2 weeks. And don't come back. To my apartment. I'll pack up whatever you left and leave it with Mrs. Jenkins. What about Tyler? The question slipped out before he could stop it. He cares about you. He'll want to see you. Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Grief, perhaps. Or regret. You should have thought about that before you used your child in this charade. With that, she turned and walked away, her slender figure moving quickly through the restaurant toward the exit. Ethan started to follow, but stopped himself. What right did he have to pursue her after what he'd done? He sank back into his chair, the untouched champagne mocking him from its ice bucket. The maitre d' approached cautiously. Is everything all right, Mr. Carter? Should we cancel your dinner reservation? Yes, Ethan replied, his voice flat. Cancel it. He pulled out his wallet and placed several large bills on the table for the champagne and the trouble. The drive back to Mrs. Jenkins's apartment to pick up Tyler was a blur. When he arrived, his son was curled up on the elderly woman's sofa, fast asleep with one of Lily's books clutched to his chest. He's been asking when you'd both be back, Mrs. Jenkins whispered, her kind face concerned. Said he had a new chapter to read with his mom tonight. The innocent comment was like a knife to Ethan's heart. There's been a change of plans, he managed to say. We're going back to our own place tonight. Mrs. Jenkins looked confused, but didn't press the issue. Ethan gathered Tyler in his arms, the boy barely stirring as he was carried to the car. Their penthouse felt cavernous and sterile after the cozy warmth of Lily's apartment. Ethan laid Tyler in his own bed, surrounded by the expensive toys and gadgets that had seemed so important just weeks ago. The boy's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Where's Lily?" he mumbled sleepily. "She's at her place," Ethan replied, his throat tight. "Go back to sleep, buddy. We'll talk in the morning." That night, Ethan sat in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of his success, feeling more alone than he had since Sarah's passing. He'd made a terrible mistake, not in teaching Tyler about compassion, but in the way he'd gone about it, using Lily's generosity as an object lesson without considering the consequences. Morning brought the difficult task of explaining to Tyler why they wouldn't be going back to Lily's apartment. The boy sat at their large kitchen island, pushing his cereal around the bowl, his face clouded with confusion and hurt. "But why?" he demanded, when Ethan explained that they had to return to their real lives. "I like living with Lily. She makes you smile again." The simple observation cut deep. It was true. Ethan had found himself smiling more in those 2 weeks than he had in the 3 years since losing Sarah. "I wasn't honest with Lily," Ethan explained carefully. "I didn't tell her who we really are, and that hurt her feelings." Tyler considered this, his young face serious. "So tell her you're sorry. When I do something wrong and say sorry, you always forgive me." If only adult relationships were that simple, Ethan thought ruefully. Sometimes sorry isn't enough, buddy. Sometimes trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to re-establish their normal routine. He returned to work, catching up on the business matters his assistant had been handling in his absence. Tyler went back to school, though with none of his usual enthusiasm. The household staff, especially Mrs. Davis, were clearly relieved to have them home, though puzzled by the changes in both father and son. "He hardly touched his tablet all weekend," Mrs. Davis reported, concern evident in her voice. "And he asked me to donate half his toys to charity, said other kids need them more." Ethan nodded, a bittersweet pride mixing with his ongoing regret. At least that part of the lesson had taken hold. Tyler was developing the empathy and awareness that Ethan had hoped to instill. But at what cost? A week after their return, Ethan found Tyler sitting on the floor of his closet, looking at something clutched in his small hands. When Ethan approached, he saw it was a photograph, one of the few Tyler had of Sarah, taken at the community center where she volunteered. "I miss Mom," Tyler said softly. "Both of them." Ethan sat down beside his son, putting an arm around his thin shoulders. "I miss them too." "Can we at least call Lily? Tell her we're sorry?" "I've tried," Ethan admitted. He had dozens of unanswered calls, voicemails that received no response, even a letter explaining everything that had been returned unopened. "She doesn't want to talk to us right now." Tyler looked up at him, his eyes serious beyond his years. "You really messed up, didn't you, Dad?" Despite everything, Ethan had to suppress a smile at his son's blunt assessment. "Yes, I really did." "So, what are you going to do to fix it?" That was the question that had been haunting Ethan for days. What could he possibly do to repair the damage he'd caused? How could he make amends for betraying Lily's trust in such a fundamental way? The answer came to him that night as he reviewed plans for a new Carter development project, a mixed-use building in a neighborhood not far from where Lily lived. One of the retail spaces on the ground floor had been designated for a high-end coffee shop, but Ethan suddenly saw a different possibility. The next morning, he made 2 calls, one to his attorney to begin drafting new documents, and one to a commercial real estate broker who specialized in small business development. Then he drove to Lily's apartment building, knowing he wouldn't find her at home during working hours, but needing to see Mrs. Jenkins. The elderly woman was surprised, but pleased to see him. "I was wondering when you'd come back," she said, inviting him in. "That girl's been miserable, you know, hardly sleeps from the sound of it." "Has she said anything about us?" Ethan asked, hope flaring briefly. "Not directly, but I hear her pacing at night, and once I'm pretty sure I heard her crying." Mrs. Jenkins fixed him with a knowing look. "What exactly happened between you two?" "I made a mistake," Ethan admitted. "A serious one, and I'm trying to find a way to make it right." Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly. "Well, she's been keeping to herself mostly. Goes to work, comes home, doesn't socialize like she used to." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else. She's been looking a bit pale lately. Sick in the mornings, if you take my meaning." Ethan's heart stuttered in his chest. "You think she's—" "It's not my place to speculate," Mrs. Jenkins said firmly. "But if I were you, I'd find a way to talk to her, and soon." The possibility that Lily might be pregnant hadn't occurred to Ethan. They had been intimate only once, near the end of their time together, a night of connection that had seemed to promise a future. Could it be possible? And if so, what did it mean for them? With renewed determination, Ethan thanked Mrs. Jenkins and left, his mind racing. He had been approaching this all wrong, trying to explain himself, to justify his actions. What he needed to do was prove to Lily, through actions rather than words, that his feelings were genuine and his remorse sincere. He drove directly to Willow Tower, knowing Lily would be there, cleaning the upper floors during the afternoon shift. But as he entered the lobby, he was intercepted by the head of security, a man who, of course, recognized him immediately. "Mr. Carter, this is a surprise. Can I help you with something?" "I need to speak with one of the cleaning staff," Ethan explained. "Lily Morgan." The security chief's expression changed subtly. "Ms. Morgan no longer works here, sir. She was let go last week." "What?" Ethan was stunned. "Why?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel matters, but I believe there was an issue regarding company property." Alarm. Bells rang in Ethan's mind. Lily, who was meticulous about her work and scrupulously honest, would never have been involved in theft. Something wasn't right. "Who authorized her termination?" he demanded. "I believe it came from the executive level, sir. You'd have to check with HR for specifics." A cold suspicion began to form in Ethan's mind. There was only one person with enough influence to orchestrate something like this without his knowledge. His father, Richard Carter, the founder of Carter Development, and still a powerful presence on the board. Had his father somehow discovered Ethan's 2-week sabbatical and traced it back to Lily? And if so, what else might he have done? Chapter 5. Interference. Richard Carter's office occupied the entire top floor of the Carter Development headquarters, a testament to the man's outsized influence and ego. At 72, he had supposedly stepped back from day-to-day operations, turning the CEO position over to his son 5 years earlier. In reality, he maintained a tight grip on the company, treating Ethan's leadership as something between an apprenticeship and a trial period that never quite ended. Ethan found his father exactly where he expected, behind the massive mahogany desk that had intimidated business rivals for decades. Richard didn't look up from his computer when Ethan entered, a power move he'd employed throughout Ethan's childhood. "I was wondering when you'd surface," Richard said finally, his voice carrying the slight rasp that years of expensive cigars had left behind. 2 weeks playing vagrant, not your most professional decision." So he did know. Ethan shouldn't have been surprised. His father had always maintained an extensive network of informants throughout the company and the city. Nothing that might affect the Carter name escaped his attention for long. "How did you find out?" Ethan asked, remaining standing despite the chair positioned across from his father's desk. Richard finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes, so similar to Ethan's own, sharp with disapproval. "Does it matter? What matters is that the CEO of Carter Development was spotted doing manual labor in one of our properties while living in some cleaning woman's apartment." He shook his head in disgust. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about my son," Ethan replied evenly. "About the values I want him to learn." "Values?" Richard's laugh was as cold as his gaze. "You mean like deception? Manipulation? Because that's what you were teaching him, pretending to be something you're not." The criticism stung because it echoed Ethan's own regrets. "That wasn't my intention." "Intentions are irrelevant. Results matter." Richard leaned back in his chair. "And the result could have been disastrous. What if someone had recognized you? What if word had gotten out that Ethan Carter was slumming it with the help?" The board would have questioned your stability, your judgment. Is that why you had Lily fired? Ethan asked directly, refusing to be sidetracked by his father's lecture. To protect the company image? A thin smile spread across Richard's face. I had her reassigned, not fired. She now works here at headquarters. The executive floor needed a new member of the cleaning staff. Shock and anger surged through Ethan. You brought her here, where you could watch her, where I could evaluate. Her, Richard corrected. This woman clearly had some kind of influence over you. I needed to understand what made her special. His smile faded. So far, I've been unimpressed. Just another opportunist with a sob story. Lily is not an opportunist, Ethan snapped, his control slipping. She's one of the most genuine, compassionate people I've ever met. She helped us when she thought we had nothing, expected nothing in return. Everyone wants something, Richard replied dismissively. She's just playing a longer game than most. And it nearly worked, didn't it? You were ready to bring her into our world, maybe even into the family. Ethan stared at his father, suddenly understanding the depth of the older man's interference. What exactly have you done? Richard waved a hand carelessly. Nothing dramatic. Simply transferred her to a position where she could be properly supervised. Paid her more, in fact. She should be grateful. But she's not, Ethan guessed, recognizing the calculating look in his father's eyes. No, Richard admitted. She's proved surprisingly principled, refuses to discuss you or your time in her apartment, declined the offer of a more comfortable position as my personal assistant. He drummed his fingers on the desk. Intriguing, but ultimately irrelevant. She'll move on eventually, and so will you. I want her reinstated at Willow Tower, Ethan demanded. Today. Richard's eyebrows rose. You're still hung up on this woman? After she threw you out? After she refused to even speak to you? She had every right to be angry, Ethan said. I deceived her, but that doesn't give you the right to interfere in her life. Everything that affects you affects me, Richard replied, his voice hardening. Everything that affects this company affects me. I built Carter Development from nothing, turned it into one of the most respected firms in New England. I won't stand by and watch you jeopardize that legacy over some misguided infatuation. It's not an infatuation, Ethan said quietly. I love her. Richard stared at him for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Your mother was the same way, too soft, too easily swayed by emotion rather than reason. I had hoped you'd outgrow that weakness. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Boston skyline. Do you know what the average cleaning person makes in this city? Barely enough to cover rent in those rundown neighborhoods. Is that the life you envision for yourself? For Tyler? That's not the point. It's exactly the point, Richard interrupted sharply. You live in different worlds. You have responsibilities to this company, to your son, to the Carter name. Responsibilities that don't include throwing it all away on some quixotic romance with a woman who couldn't possibly understand or fit into your reality. Ethan felt a surge of the old, familiar inadequacy that his father had instilled in him. Since childhood, always the disappointment, never measuring up to Richard Carter's exacting standards. But then he thought of Lily, of her quiet strength, her unwavering integrity despite hardships that would have broken many, and found his resolve. You're wrong about her, he said firmly, and you're wrong about me. I'm not asking for your approval, Dad. I'm telling you to back off. Lily's life is not yours to manipulate. Richard turned from the window, his expression coldly amused. And what will you do if I don't back off? As you put it, take control of the company. The board would never support you against me, threaten to leave. We both know you don't have the courage to walk away from everything I've built for you. The assessment was cutting, but not entirely inaccurate. Ethan had never seriously considered leaving Carter Development, had never imagined a life outside the path his father had laid out for him since birth. But now, faced with his father's casual cruelty, he found himself wondering if there might be more freedom in having less. Just stay out of this, Ethan said finally. That's all I'm asking. Richard studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. Fine. Your cleaning woman is of no further interest to me. Consider my involvement ended. The capitulation was too easy, too smooth, but Ethan was too relieved to press further. Thank you. As he turned to leave, his father's voice stopped him at the door. Oh, and Ethan? Tyler's trust fund reverts to my control if you ever leave. The company, just something to keep in mind while you're contemplating your options. The veiled threat hung in the air as Ethan left without responding. His father had always been a master of the last word, of planting seeds of doubt that would grow into forests of uncertainty. But this time, Ethan refused to let those seeds take root. He drove directly to the headquarters service entrance, where the cleaning staff would be checking in for the afternoon shift. After 20 minutes of waiting, he spotted her. Lily, dressed in the standard uniform, her hair pulled back, her expression guarded as she approached the employee entrance with a group of other cleaners. She saw him immediately, faltering mid-step, before squaring her shoulders and continuing forward as if he weren't there. The others noticed, exchanging curious glances as they passed the well-dressed man, clearly waiting for their colleague. "Lily, please," Ethan said quietly as she attempted to walk past him. "Just 5 minutes." "I have to clock in," she replied stiffly, not meeting his eyes. "Some of us can't afford to be late to work." "I know my father had you transferred here," Ethan persisted. "I had nothing to do with it. I just found out today." Something flickered in her expression, surprised perhaps that he knew about the transfer. "It doesn't matter. A job is a job." "It does matter. He's interfering in your life because of me, and I'm sorry." Lily finally looked at him directly, her eyes tired but still defiant. "Is that why you're here? To apologize for your father now?" "To?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm here because I miss you, because Tyler misses you, because what happened between us, the connection we formed, was real, even if the circumstances weren't." She glanced toward the door where her co-workers had disappeared. "I really need to go." "I'll fix this," Ethan promised. "I'll get you your old job back at Willow Tower if that's what you want. Or—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I can help you start that bookstore you talked about. The one with the reading room for neighborhood kids." Now he had her full attention, her eyes widening in disbelief. "You can't just throw money at this problem, Ethan. That's not how real life works." "I know," he acknowledged. "Money can't fix the trust I broke, but it can help you achieve your dream. A dream you had long before you met me. That's not throwing money at a problem. It's investing in something worthwhile, something that matters." Lily shook her head, though with less certainty than before. "I don't know what you want from me." "Just talk to me," Ethan pleaded. "Not here, not now, but soon. Let me explain everything. After that, if you still want nothing to do with me, I'll respect your decision." She seemed to wrestle with herself, conflicting emotions playing across her expressive face. Finally, she sighed. "Saturday, the coffee shop on the corner of my block, 9 a.m. Relief washed through him. "Thank you. I'll be there." "I have to go," she repeated, but paused before entering the building. "How's Tyler?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern despite everything, confirmed what Ethan already knew. Lily's affection for his son had been real. "He misses you," Ethan said honestly. "Asks about you every day." Pain flashed in her eyes. Tell him I miss him too." With that, she disappeared inside, leaving Ethan with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Saturday would be his chance, perhaps his only chance, to make things right. What he didn't know was that his father had observed their entire exchange from his office window high above, his face impassive as he reached for his phone to make a call. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Ethan consulted with business advisors about creating a grant program for small business startups, specifically focused on educational initiatives. He researched commercial properties available in Lily's neighborhood, finding several that would be perfect for the bookstore she had described. He even drafted preliminary business plans, running projections to ensure the venture could be sustainable with the right support. Tyler, meanwhile, had thrown himself into a mysterious project, spending hours in his room with art supplies and refusing to let anyone see what he was working on. "It's for Lily," was all he would say when asked, his young face set with determination. "For when we see her again." On Friday afternoon, Ethan was reviewing the final details of his proposal when his assistant buzzed through. "Your father is here to see you, Mr. Carter." Ethan sighed, mentally preparing himself for another confrontation. "Send him in." Richard entered, impeccably dressed as always, a manila folder tucked under one arm. "I thought you should see this," he said without preamble, dropping the folder on Ethan's desk. Inside was a security report from the executive floor, complete with photographs taken from surveillance cameras. The images showed Lily cleaning Richard's office, opening his desk drawer, examining a valuable watch that had been left there. "What is this?" Ethan demanded, though he already suspected the answer. "Evidence," Richard replied calmly. "Ms. Morgan was caught attempting to steal my Patek Philippe yesterday evening. Security detained her, but I've decided not to press charges yet." Ethan felt sick. "This is a setup. Lily would never steal anything." "The cameras don't lie," Richard said with a shrug. "She's been suspended pending an investigation, though I imagine she won't be returning regardless of the outcome." "How you planted the watch?" Ethan accused, standing abruptly. "You set her up because I wouldn't drop this." Richard's expression remained impassive. "Believe what you want. The fact remains that she was caught with a $75,000 watch in her possession, one she had no business touching. Even the suggestion of impropriety is enough to end her employment here." He reclaimed the folder. "I thought you should know before your meeting tomorrow." "You had me followed," Ethan realized, disgust rising in his throat. "I protect my interests," Richard corrected. "Always have, always will." After his father left, Ethan immediately tried calling Lily, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He left an urgent message, then grabbed his keys and headed for her apartment. She needed to know this wasn't over, that he wouldn't let his father's machinations stand. But when he arrived at her building, Mrs. Jenkins intercepted him in the lobby, her kind face creased with worry. "She's not there," the elderly woman informed him. "Packed a bag and left about an hour ago, said she needed some time away." "Did she say where she was going?" Ethan asked desperately. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "Just that she'd be staying with a friend for a while. She looked upset, that poor girl. Said something about history repeating itself." Ethan understood immediately. Just as she had lost her previous job due to circumstances beyond her control, her mother's illness, now she had lost another position through no fault of her own. And just like before, she had been falsely accused, her integrity questioned. "If she contacts you, please tell her I know the truth," Ethan said urgently. "Tell her I believe her, and I'm going to fix this." As he drove home, his mind raced with possibilities. His father had gone too far this time, crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, using his position and influence to deliberately damage an innocent person's reputation, to potentially ruin her career prospects. It was unconscionable. But Richard Carter had overlooked one crucial detail in his scheme. He hadn't accounted for Tyler, because while the adults had been engaged in their power struggle, the 8-year-old had been conducting an investigation of his own, one that would soon turn the tables in a way no one could have anticipated. Chapter 6: Separation and Illness. Lily stared out the window of her childhood friend's apartment in Somerville, watching raindrops race down the glass. It had been 3 days since she'd fled her own place, 3 days of dodging calls from Ethan and ignoring Mrs. Jenkins's well-meaning text messages, 3 days of wrestling with a decision that would affect not just her life, but the life growing inside her. "You need to eat something," Jennifer said, placing a mug of tea and a plate of toast on the coffee table. Jennifer had been Lily's best friend since middle school, the one constant through all the upheavals of her life. "For both of you." Lily placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I still can't believe it." "Believe it," Jennifer replied pragmatically. "The test was pretty clear. Have you decided what you're going to tell him?" "Nothing for now." Lily picked up the mug, letting the warmth seep into her palms. "He lied to me, Jen, about everything. His name, his job, his entire life." "I get that," Jennifer acknowledged. sitting beside her on the worn sofa. But doesn't his son deserve to know he's going to have a sibling? The mention of Tyler, or rather his real name, which she was still getting used to, sent a pang through Lily's heart. She missed the boy terribly, his curious questions, his resilience, the way he had looked at her with such open trust. "I just need time to think," Lily said, "to figure out what's real and what isn't." Her phone buzzed for what felt like the 100th time that day. Jennifer glanced at the screen. "It's him again!" Lily shook her head. "I can't talk to him yet. You'll have to eventually," Jennifer pointed out gently. "This isn't the kind of problem that just goes away." That much was true. Besides the pregnancy, there was the matter of the theft accusation, a fabrication she was certain had been orchestrated by Ethan's father. The elder Carter's disdain for her had been evident from their first interaction at company headquarters. He had viewed her as beneath notice until she became a potential complication in his son's life. Then, she had become a problem to be solved. The key. Accusation was absurdly transparent. She had never so much as touched the watch she was accused of stealing, but it was her word against one of the most powerful men in Boston. Even if she fought it, the taint of suspicion would follow her, making it difficult to find employment elsewhere. "I might leave Boston," she said abruptly. Jennifer's eyes widened. "Leave? And go where?" "My cousin Melissa has been asking me to visit her in Portland for years. She manages a bookstore there, said they're always looking for help." Lily traced the rim of her mug. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start." "Because of him? You'd let a man drive you away from your home, your friends, everything you've built here?" "It's not just about Ethan," Lily protested. "It's about his father, too. The man basically owns half the city. He got me fired from Willow Tower, then set me up at headquarters. What's to stop him from interfering again wherever I find work next?" Jennifer considered this. "That's a fair point. But what about your degree? You're only 2 semesters away from finishing." "I can complete it online," Lily countered, though. The thought of delaying her teaching certification was another bitter pill to swallow. Besides, it might be a better place to raise a child, cheaper, less crowded. "And the father would be hundreds of miles away," Jennifer observed. "Is that really what you want?" Lily didn't answer immediately. The truth was, despite everything, she still had feelings for Ethan. The connection they had formed over those 2 weeks had felt genuine, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. She had glimpsed a side of him that she suspected few people ever saw. Vulnerable, thoughtful, struggling to be a good father without a partner to help shoulder the burden. But could she ever trust him again? And could she ever fit into his world of wealth and privilege, where people like her were usually invisible, except when serving coffee or cleaning floors? "I don't know what I want," she admitted finally, "except maybe to stop feeling so used." Jennifer squeezed her hand sympathetically. "For what it's worth, from everything you've told me, I think he really does care about you. The elaborate lie was messed up, no question, but he didn't have to come clean. He could have just disappeared from your life without explanation." "Maybe that would have been kinder," Lily murmured. "No," Jennifer said firmly. "It wouldn't have been, because then you'd always wonder why this guy and his son, who seemed to care about you, just vanished." She paused, then added, "And you wouldn't know about this baby." Lily sighed, knowing her friend was right. As hurt and angry as she was, complete ignorance would have been worse. "I should at least hear him out, shouldn't I?" "I think you owe yourself that much," Jennifer agreed. "Not him, yourself, just to get some closure, if nothing else." Lily nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, I'll call him tomorrow." But fate had other plans. That evening, as Lily was helping Jennifer prepare dinner, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something, intuition perhaps, made her answer. "Hello? Is this Lily Morgan?" An unfamiliar woman's voice, professional, but with an undercurrent of urgency. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Nurse Daniels from Boston Children's Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of Tyler Carter. You're listed as his emergency contact after his father." Lily's heart seemed to stop. "Tyler, is he all right?" What happened? He's been admitted with pneumonia, the nurse explained. His condition is stable, but he's been asking for you. His father is here, but Tyler seems quite distressed and keeps calling for Lily Mom. We've been trying to reach you for several hours. Lily's hand tightened on the phone. I'll be right there. Please tell him I'm coming. After a hurried explanation to Jennifer, who immediately offered to drive her, Lily grabbed her coat and rushed out into the rain. The drive to the hospital seemed interminable, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Pneumonia could be serious, especially in children. Why hadn't Ethan called her directly? Had he tried, and she'd ignored it, thinking it was just another attempt to explain his deception? The pediatric ward was quiet when they arrived, visiting hours nearly over. Lily approached the nurse's station, her heart pounding. I'm here for Tyler Carter. I'm Lily Morgan, his emergency contact. The nurse checked her computer. Room 412. His father is with him now. Lily hesitated, suddenly nervous about facing Ethan under these circumstances, but concern for Tyler overrode her apprehension. Thank you. She found the room easily, pausing in the doorway to take in the scene. Tyler lay in the hospital bed, looking small and vulnerable amid the monitors and IV lines. Ethan sat beside him, holding his hand, his back to the door. He was speaking softly, his voice rough with worry. She's coming, buddy, I promise. Try to rest. Lily? Tyler's voice was weak but hopeful, his eyes searching past his father toward the door. Ethan turned, his face drawn with exhaustion and relief mingling in his eyes when he saw her. You came. Of course I came, Lily replied, moving to Tyler's side. Hey kiddo, I heard you're not feeling so hot. Tyler's pale face lit up. You're here. Dad said you would come, but I was scared you wouldn't. His breathing was labored, punctuated by a deep cough that shook his small frame. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Lily assured him, brushing his damp hair back from his forehead. She glanced at Ethan. What happened? It started as a cold, 2 days ago, he explained, his voice low. Then his fever spiked this morning and he was having trouble breathing. The doctor says it's pneumonia, but they caught it early. He's responding well to antibiotics. Lily nodded, relief washing through her. That's good, that's really good. Will you stay? Tyler asked, his eyes already drooping with the combined effects of medication and exhaustion. Please? I'll stay, Lily promised, pulling a chair to the opposite side of the bed from Ethan. Try to sleep now. I'll be right here when you wake up. Tyler's hand found hers, small fingers wrapping around her own with surprising strength. I knew you'd come, he murmured as he drifted off. You're the best, Mom. Lily felt tears prick her eyes at the simple declaration. Across the bed, Ethan watched her with an unreadable expression. Thank you for coming, he said quietly once Tyler was asleep. They called you because he kept asking for you. Wouldn't settle down, even with the medication. Why didn't you call me directly? Lily asked, careful to keep her voice low. I did, 12 times. Ethan looked exhausted, his usual polish replaced by rumpled clothes and stubbled cheeks. I thought maybe if it came from the hospital you'd answer. Guilt twinged in Lily's chest. She had been so caught up in her own hurt feelings that she hadn't considered there might be a genuine emergency behind those persistent calls. I'm sorry, she said. I should have at least checked the messages. No, I'm the one who should be sorry, Ethan replied, rubbing a hand over his face. For everything, the lies, the deception, and now for my father's interference. Lily tensed. You know about that. The watch? Yes. It was a setup, Lily. I know you would never steal anything. She nodded, a weight lifting slightly at his belief in her integrity. Your father really doesn't want me in your life. My father wants to control everything and everyone connected to the Carter name, Ethan said with quiet bitterness. He always has, but this time he's gone too far. They fell silent, the only sounds in the room the steady beep of monitors and Tyler's slightly labored breathing. Lily studied the sleeping child, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the flush of fever still evident on his cheeks. He hasn't been the same since we left your place, Ethan said softly, following her gaze. Neither have I, for that matter. Lily looked up, meeting his eyes across the bed. Why did you do it, Ethan? The whole homeless charade. Was it really just to teach Tyler about compassion? At first, yes, he admitted. After Sarah, my wife, passed away, I noticed Tyler becoming more materialistic, entitled. I wanted him to understand that a person's worth isn't measured by what they own. He paused, his expression thoughtful. But it became more than that. Being with you, in your home, it was the first time in years that I felt like myself. Not Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Development, but just me. The sincerity in his voice was difficult to dismiss, but Lily remained cautious. You could have told me the truth sooner. I should have, he agreed. Every day I spent with you, the lie became harder to maintain. I kept looking for the right moment, but I was afraid you'd react exactly as you did, that you'd feel betrayed and want nothing to do with me. His voice dropped, afraid of losing what we were building. Lily felt her resolve wavering. The past 3 days had given her time to process her initial shock and anger, to consider the situation from multiple angles. Yes, Ethan had deceived her, but his motives hadn't been malicious, and the connection they had formed, was that worth throwing away completely? Where do we go from here? She asked finally, the question encompassing far more than she was ready to articulate. Ethan seemed to understand the layers behind her words. That depends on you, Lily. I can tell you that I'm sorry, that I'll spend every day trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. I can promise that my father will never interfere in your life again. He hesitated, then added softly, I can tell you that I love you, and that these past weeks without you have been emptier than I could have imagined. The declaration hung in the air between them, sincere yet daunting in its implications. Before Lily could respond, Tyler stirred, his eyes fluttering open. You're still here, he murmured to Lily, sounding relieved. I promised, didn't I? She replied, squeezing his hand. How are you feeling? Thirsty, he rasped. Ethan reached for the cup of water on the bedside table, helping Tyler take small sips through a straw. The tenderness in his actions, the gentle way he supported his son's head, reminded Lily of why she had been drawn to him in the first place, not his wealth or status, but his genuine love for his child. I made something for you, Tyler said to Lily after drinking. But it's at home. Dad was supposed to give it to you on Saturday. Saturday? Lily looked questioningly at Ethan. Our coffee meeting, he explained. Tyler insisted on contributing to my apology strategy. Despite everything, Lily found herself smiling. Well, now I'm curious. It's a book, Tyler confided, his voice still weak but animated by excitement. About us. About how we met you and how you helped us and how you're the kindest person ever. That sounds wonderful, Lily said, touched by the boy's effort. I can't wait to see it. And there's something else, Tyler continued, his expression turning serious. About Grandpa. I know what he did. Ethan straightened in his chair. What do you mean, buddy? I heard him on the phone, Tyler explained, his words punctuated by a small cough, in his office when you were in a meeting. He was talking about Lily, saying he needed to remove the complication, so I started recording him. Lily and Ethan exchanged startled glances. Recording him? Ethan asked carefully. How? With your old phone, Tyler replied, as if it were obvious. The one you gave me to play games on. It has a recording app. He looked at Lily. I knew something bad was happening when Dad said you couldn't come back to our house, so I started spying on Grandpa. Ethan looked stunned. Tyler, that's very resourceful, but he said he was going to plant a watch in your office and call security, Tyler continued, his gaze fixed on Lily. He said it would make you look bad so no one would hire you again. His small face hardened with an anger that seemed too adult for his years. He's mean, he's really, really mean. Lily was speechless, processing the implications of Tyler's revelation. Beside her, Ethan had gone very still. Where is this recording now? He asked his son, his voice carefully controlled. On the phone, At home. Tyler's eyes were beginning to droop again, the burst of energy fading. I was going to give it to Lily on Saturday too, so she'd know it wasn't her fault. As Tyler drifted back to sleep, Lily and Ethan sat in weighted silence, the revelation casting their situation in yet another new light. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice a mixture of pride and disbelief. My 8-year-old son just outsmarted my father, the same father who's outmaneuvered business rivals for 40 years. He's a remarkable kid, Lily said softly. You should be proud. I am, Ethan replied, gazing at his sleeping son, though I'm not sure teaching him to spy was on my parenting checklist. The unexpected joke broke some of the tension between them, and Lily found herself smiling despite everything. He did it because he cares, about both of us, I think. Ethan nodded, his expression growing serious again. Lily, there's something else you should know. Something I was going to tell you on Saturday. He took a deep breath. I've been working on a plan to help you open that bookstore you talked about. No strings attached, no obligations to me, just a chance to pursue your dream. Lily stared at him, caught off guard by the offer. Ethan, I can't accept something like that. It wouldn't be charity, he clarified quickly. It would be structured as a small business grant through a new foundation I'm establishing. You'd still need to develop a viable business plan, secure a location, handle the day-to-day operations. The grant would just provide the initial capital that most entrepreneurs struggle to raise. The thought of her own bookstore, a dream she had harbored for years but always considered unreachable, was almost too much to process on top of everything else. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, Ethan assured her. It's just something to think about, along with everything else. The unspoken everything else hung between them, his declaration of love, her unannounced pregnancy, the complications of merging their very different worlds. It was overwhelming, especially with Tyler's illness adding an immediate layer of concern. One thing at a time, Lily said finally. Right now, let's focus on getting Tyler. Well, the rest we'll figure it out. Ethan nodded, relief evident in his expression. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a willingness to consider a future that included him in some capacity. As the night deepened, they maintained their vigil on either side of Tyler's bed, occasionally speaking in low voices about inconsequential things, carefully avoiding the weightier topics that would need to be addressed eventually. By morning, Tyler's fever had broken, his breathing easier, the doctor's rounds bringing reassuring news about his recovery. And as Lily watched Ethan dozing uncomfortably in the hospital chair, his hand still holding his son's, she made her decision. Whatever happened next, whether they found a way forward together or apart, she would not run from this situation. She would face it head-on, with the same courage and integrity she had always tried to maintain. Starting with telling Ethan about the child they had created together. Chapter 7. Reconciliation and New Beginnings. Spring had arrived in Boston, bringing with it the promise of renewal that had seemed impossible during the long winter months. The public garden was awash, with early blooms, trees budding into tender green, the swan boats once again gliding across the lagoon. On a bench near the water, Lily sat with her hands resting lightly on her now visible pregnancy, watching Tyler feed the ducks with an enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster for such a simple activity. Not too close to the edge, she called, smiling as he carefully stepped back from the water. I know, he replied with the slight exasperation of a child who believed himself far more capable than adults gave him credit for. Dad says the same thing every time. That's because dads and moms think alike sometimes, Lily said, her gaze shifting to where Ethan stood a short distance away, deep in conversation on his phone. From his expression, it wasn't a pleasant call. 3 months had passed since. That night in the hospital, 3 months of careful reconciliation, of honest conversations, of rebuilding trust one day at a time. The journey hadn't been smooth. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt on both sides, the persistent interference of Richard Carter to contend with. But they had persevered, drawn together not only by the child Lily carried, but by a connection that had survived deception and emerged stronger for having been tested. Ethan concluded his call and approached, his face clearing as he rejoined them. "Sorry about that," he said, sitting beside Lily. "Work issues." "Your father—" "Say again?" Lily asked, recognizing the particular tension around his eyes that only Richard seemed to produce. Ethan nodded, taking her hand. "He's still pushing back on the Community Development Initiative, claims it's not aligned with our core business strategy." The initiative had been Ethan's response to his father's manipulations, a comprehensive program to develop affordable housing and small business spaces in underserved neighborhoods, including Lily's. It represented a significant shift in Carter Development's focus, one that had put Ethan at odds with both his father and several conservative board members. "He'll come around," Lily said, though without much conviction. Richard Carter had proven remarkably resistant to change, especially changes inspired by her influence on his son. "Maybe," Ethan replied with a wry smile. "Or maybe I'll need to go ahead without his blessing." He glanced at Tyler, still absorbed with the ducks. "Some things are worth standing up for, even against family." Lily squeezed his hand, knowing how difficult the growing rift with his father had been. Richard's attempt to sabotage her reputation had backfired spectacularly, thanks to Tyler's recordings. When confronted with the evidence, the elder Carter had initially been furious, then coldly dismissive, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing while simultaneously withdrawing his most overt opposition to Lily's presence in his son's life. It had been an uneasy truce, punctuated by occasional skirmishes whenever Richard felt Ethan was straying too far from the Carter legacy as he defined it. The Community Development Initiative was the latest battleground, with Richard viewing it as a wasteful diversion from more profitable ventures. "How's the shop coming along?" Ethan asked, changing the subject to something more pleasant. Lily brightened immediately. "The renovations should be done by next week. The children's corner is adorable. Wait until you see the mural Jennifer painted. And we've started receiving book inventory. I still can't believe it's really happening." "Believe it," Ethan said, his arms slipping around her shoulders. "You've worked incredibly hard to make it a reality." That much was true. Though Ethan had provided the initial funding through his newly established foundation, Lily had thrown herself into making Turning Pages, her bookstore and community reading center, a viable business. She had researched inventory management, developed marketing strategies, networked with local schools and community organizations, and personally selected every title that would grace the shelves. Her teaching degree, completed during the winter, had informed her vision for the educational programming the store would offer. "Mom, Dad, look!" Tyler called, drawing their attention to a family of ducklings that had appeared from beneath a nearby bridge. His face was alight with wonder, his previous illness long forgotten in the resilience of childhood. "We see them, buddy," Ethan called back. "They're pretty small. Make sure you don't scare them." Tyler nodded solemnly, creeping closer to the water's edge with exaggerated care that made both adults smile. "He's going to be a great big brother," Lily murmured, one hand moving to her abdomen where their daughter, they had learned the gender, just last week was making her presence known with enthusiastic kicks. "He's been practicing," Ethan agreed. "Reading to your stomach every night, making lists of things he wants to teach her." The easy domesticity of their conversation still sometimes caught Lily by surprise. After Tyler's recovery, she had moved back to her apartment, determined to maintain some independence while they navigated their complicated relationship. But she had spent more and more time at Ethan's penthouse until it seemed natural to bring some of her belongings there, to carve out spaces that were distinctly hers within his world. They weren't living together officially, not yet. But the boundaries were blurring. The nursery they were preparing in Ethan's home was filled with furniture Lily had chosen, books from her own childhood, a rocking chair that had belonged to her mother. Her touches were visible throughout the penthouse now, plants on the windowsills, colorful throws over the austere designer furniture, framed photographs that captured moments of genuine joy rather than staged perfection. "We should head back soon," Ethan said, checking his watch. The caterers are arriving at 4 and I promised Mrs. Davis we wouldn't be late. Tonight was the official engagement party, a small gathering of close friends rather than the society event Richard had pushed for. Lily had been adamant about keeping it intimate, uncomfortable with the scrutiny that came with her new position as Ethan Carter's fiancée. The proposal had come just a month ago, on the day they'd learned they were having a daughter. Simple, heartfelt, with Tyler as an eager accomplice hiding the ring in the pages of The Hobbit, the book she had read to him during those first days together. "Just a few more minutes," Lily requested, enjoying the peaceful scene before them. "Hair's so beautiful here." Ethan nodded, content to indulge her. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Tyler's continued fascination with the ducks, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of new blossoms. It was moments like these, ordinary, unhurried, free from pretense, that had ultimately won Lily's heart again, convincing her that the man beside her was indeed the person she had come to love during those 2 weeks in her apartment. Not the carefully constructed persona of Ethan Carter, business magnate. "I got a call from the community center yesterday," Lily mentioned after a while. "They want to partner with the bookstore for an after-school reading program, sliding scale fees with scholarships for families who can't afford even the minimum." "That sounds perfect," Ethan said. "Exactly what you envisioned." "It is," Lily agreed. "Though I'll need to hire another staff person if we expand the programming that much." "What about Jennifer?" Ethan suggested. "She's artistic, good with kids from what you've told me, and she already knows the business from helping with the setup." Lily considered it. That could work. She's been talking about leaving her current job. She glanced at him with a smile. "See? I told you you'd be good at the small business thing. All those big corporate strategies can scale down surprisingly well." Ethan laughed. "Don't tell my father that. He still thinks I'm throwing away my Harvard business degree on your little project." The mention of Richard dampened the mood slightly. Despite all evidence to the contrary, he remained convinced that Lily was somehow taking advantage of his son's generosity, that the pregnancy and engagement were calculated moves to secure her position. His barely concealed disdain had made family gatherings tense, to the point where Ethan had begun limiting Tyler's time with his grandfather. "Will he be there tonight?" Lily asked quietly. Ethan's expression turned serious. "I invited him. Whether he shows up is another matter entirely." The invitation had been Lily's idea, actually, an olive branch extended despite Richard's behavior. She had no illusions about winning his approval, but for Ethan's sake, and especially for Tyler's, she hoped for at least a civil relationship with the family patriarch. "If he does come, I'll be on my best behavior," she promised with a small smile. "It's not your behavior I'm worried about," Ethan replied dryly. Their conversation was interrupted by Tyler running back to them, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Can we get ice cream before we go home, please?" "I think we have time for a quick stop," Ethan agreed, checking his watch again. "But only if you promise to help set up for the party when we get back." "I promise," Tyler declared, taking Lily's hand to help her up from the bench, a gallant gesture he had recently adopted, clearly mimicking his father's attentiveness. As they walked toward the park exit, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance encounter born of deception to a relationship built on hard-won honesty, from strangers from different worlds to a family preparing to welcome a new life. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been worth it. The engagement party was everything Lily had hoped for. Intimate, joyful, free from the excessive formalities she had come to associate with Carter social events. Their apartment was filled with a carefully curated guest list: Jennifer and a few of Lily's other close friends, Ethan's executive assistant and her husband, Mrs. Jenkins, who had become a surrogate grandmother figure to Tyler, several of Lily's former colleagues from Willow Tower, and even Mike from maintenance, whose gruff exterior had softened considerably when presented with an engraved invitation. Conspicuously absent was Richard Carter. Though not entirely unexpected, his absence cast a shadow over Ethan's otherwise cheerful demeanor. Lily caught him glancing at the door more than once during the evening, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face each time it opened to reveal another guest, never his father. "He's missing out, not you," she told him quietly during a moment alone, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "This is perfect, just as it is." Ethan's smile was tinged with sadness. "I know. I just thought maybe this time he'd surprise me." The doorbell rang again and Ethan's attention shifted immediately. Lily felt a surge of hope for his sake, but it was Mrs. Davis who appeared in the entryway, announcing in her formal way, "Mr. Richard Carter has arrived." The conversation in the room dimmed noticeably as Richard entered, impeccably dressed as always, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the gathering. Ethan moved to greet him, the tension in his shoulders visible only to those who knew him well. "Dad, I'm glad you could make it." Richard nodded stiffly. "I said I would consider it." His gaze swept the room again, lingering briefly on Lily before returning to his son. "A rather eclectic group you've assembled." "Friends," Ethan corrected firmly. "People who matter. To us." Something shifted in Richard's expression, not quite softening, but perhaps a recognition that his usual tactics would find no purchase here. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "I brought this for you. Consider it an engagement gift." Ethan accepted it cautiously. "Thank you." "Open it now," Richard instructed. "I'd like to see your reaction." With a glance at Lily, who had moved to his side, Ethan opened the envelope and removed several documents. As he scanned them, his expression changed from wariness to disbelief. "Dad, this is the approval for your community development initiative," Richard confirmed, "signed by myself and the board, with the full funding allocation you requested." Lily felt Ethan's shock mirrored in her own reaction. This was the last thing either of them had expected. "Why?" Ethan asked directly. Richard's gaze shifted to Tyler, who was watching the exchange intently from across the room. "Let's just say a certain young man made a compelling case for the project's merits. He's quite persuasive when he wants to be." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Reminds me of your mother, actually." The mention of Ethan's mother, a topic Richard typically avoided, was as surprising as the approval itself. Ethan seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Thank you," he managed finally. "This means a lot." Richard nodded, his attention turning to Lily. "Ms. Morgan, you're looking well." "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Lily replied evenly. "I'm glad you could join us tonight." "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I understand congratulations are in order, not just for the engagement, but for your business venture as well." Lily blinked, surprised by what almost sounded like approval. "The bookstore opens next month. You're welcome to attend the grand opening." "Perhaps I will," Richard said, in a tone that suggested he almost certainly wouldn't. But the mere acknowledgement of her project was more than he had previously offered. Tyler approached then, breaking the awkward moment. "Grandpa, you came!" His enthusiasm was genuine, despite the complicated relationship he had with his grandfather. "Did you give them the papers for the buildings that will help people?" "I did," Richard confirmed, his expression softening marginally as it always did around his grandson. "Your presentation was quite convincing." Tyler beamed. "I used charts, and everything just like you taught me, and I remembered to emphasize the long-term benefits, not just the immediate outcomes." Ethan raised an eyebrow at this glimpse into private conversations between his father and son. Richard Carter, corporate titan, apparently had been giving business strategy lessons to an 8-year-old, and that 8-year-old had used those lessons to advocate for a social welfare project. "Well," Richard said, straightening his already impeccable tie, "I won't stay long. I have an early flight to London tomorrow." He placed a hand briefly on Tyler's shoulder. "But I wanted to deliver this in person, and to say—" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what came next. "That your mother would have approved of this initiative, Ethan. She always believed in giving back to the community." With that surprising admission, he nodded to the room at large and departed, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind him. "Well," Jennifer said, breaking the tension, "that was unexpected." "Very," Ethan agreed, still staring at the documents in his hand. "Tyler, What exactly did you say to your grandfather? Tyler shrugged with the easy confidence of a child who doesn't yet realize when he's done something extraordinary. I just showed him how the bookstore is helping lots of kids learn to read, and how if we built more places like that, more kids would have better lives. And I said my first mom, would have wanted to help kids, because that's what she did at her community center. The simple wisdom of his approach, appealing to Richard's business sense while simultaneously invoking the memory of Ethan's mother, was remarkably sophisticated for a child his age. Ethan and Lily exchanged glances of equal parts pride and amazement. "You're something else, you know that?" Ethan told his son, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Does this mean we can build the bookstore even bigger?" Tyler asked hopefully. Lily laughed. "Let's see how the first one goes before we start expanding, okay?" The party resumed its festive atmosphere, the momentary tension dispelled by Richard's departure. As the evening progressed, Lily found herself observing the gathering with a sense of wonder at how dramatically her life had changed in just a few months. From the solitary existence she had maintained since her mother's passing, to this vibrant circle of friends and family, from struggling to make ends meet to preparing to open her own business, from resigned acceptance of her circumstances to actively creating the future she wanted. Later, as they bid farewell to the last guests, Ethan pulled her close in the quiet of their living room. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Very," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm still processing your father's surprise appearance and approval." "That makes two of us," Ethan admitted. "In all my years, I've never seen him change his mind so completely once it was made up." He glanced toward Tyler's room, where the boy was already asleep after the excitement of the evening. "Our son is apparently a better negotiator than either of us." "Our son," Lily repeated, the phrase still new enough to send a warm glow through her. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." Ethan's hand rested gently on her rounded abdomen. "And soon, our daughter too." The wedding took place in June, a simple ceremony in the public garden where they had spent so many afternoons. Tyler served as best man, proudly carrying the rings and standing tall beside his father. Jennifer was maid of honor, and Mrs. Jenkins cried happy tears from the front row. Even Richard attended, maintaining a dignified presence that, if not entirely approving, was at least respectful. The Community Development Initiative broke ground the following month, transforming an abandoned warehouse near Lily's old apartment into affordable housing units with retail spaces below, including an expanded location for turning pages, which had quickly outgrown its original storefront. The project became a model for similar developments throughout the city, earning praise from urban planners and community advocates alike. Ethan found a new sense of purpose in this work, leveraging his business acumen for social good in a way that honored Sarah's memory while creating a legacy of his own. Richard, to everyone's surprise, became an unlikely ally once he recognized the positive publicity and goodwill the initiative generated for Carter development. Lily gave birth to Emma Sarah Carter in late summer, a healthy baby girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's determined expression. Tyler embraced his role as big brother with earnest dedication, reading to her daily just as Lily had once read to him. Their family wasn't conventional by any standard, formed through deception, tested by truth, strengthened by forgiveness, and ultimately bound together by love that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. But perhaps that was what made it special, what made it theirs. On Emma's first birthday, they gathered in the garden of their new home, a compromise between Ethan's preference for the city and Lily's desire for more space, a beautiful colonial in Brookline with a yard where the children could play, and a library that housed Lily's ever-growing collection of books. As they watched Tyler help his sister take tentative steps across the grass, Ethan slipped his arm